faculty, our head of department, our lovely collaborators from the US. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking the time. And we're delighted actually that we can share the information that we have with you today. And please use this as an opportunity to ask any questions that you have as well. Okay, so I'm just going to be
Dr. Sarah, you're muted.
Did you mute me, Rob, by mistake?
Sorry, I was trying to admit someone, but someone already did that. My bad, sorry.
It's okay. All right, so if I may start by introducing two of my colleagues who work very closely with me, obviously within the biology program and within the Department of Biology, Chemistry and Environmental Sciences, and these are Dr. Amin and Dr. Reem. So what we'll do to start off with is to just give you a bit of an overview as to what the Premed program or Premed initiative looks like at AUS and the courses that we would recommend that you take. And then we'll give you a bit more information about the MCAT, and then Raitu and our colleagues in the US, Jennifer and Michael, can give you a bit more information about the MCAT preparation as well. So Dr. Amin, if I may start with you, perhaps you can give us a good start on the Premed initiative at AUS.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. I'm just sharing my presentation here. Please tell me if you see the slides.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all and thank Dr. Sarah for this opportunity. Due to time constraint, I will restrict my presentation to about 10 minutes max, but I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you as students may have. I'd like to leave some room for my colleagues to also talk a little bit about the pre-med track that we have at AUS, and also give our collaborators in the US an opportunity to talk about the MCAT as well. So historically, just to give you a little bit of a background about this pre-med track that we have at AUS. I've been here at AUS since 2007, so this is my 14th year. We had the biology program launched a year after I joined, so 2008 is the official start date of the program in biology. Given my expertise with medical schools in North America, because I got my education all in Canada, and my also expertise with medical schools across North America, even in the US, I thought with my colleagues as to why we don't offer a pre-med track, which is a set of courses that students must complete and fulfill for them to join any medical school. As you all know, for somebody to start studying medicine in a North American model of education, they have to have some kind of a degree before they start. Now, most students do go into biology, but others go into maybe chemistry or engineering or any other discipline for that matter. One of my very classmates, he was a musician. He did a degree in music and decided to join a medical school. So that's not unprecedented in North America. Maybe it's you know, something unheard of here in this part of the world. In any case, we decided, given that we offer most of these courses in pre-med, actually all of them, except the physics courses, which belong to the Department of Physics at AUS, we at AUS in general, whether it's BCE, our department, or other departments, offer every single course that is called pre-med. And I'll go through some of them fairly quickly here with you. So in 2012, I traveled to Lebanon, given that there are three universities in Lebanon that offer medical school that follows the North American model of education. Namely, this is the American University of Beirut, AUB, the Lebanese American University, LAU, and the University of Balamand. Myself and Dr. Fawaz Jmi'an, who is the ex-HOD of the department, spent about 5 days in Lebanon. We visited the three institutions. We talked to the top officials who admit students into their schools. We got a lot of details, a lot of information. And to cut a long story short, we established three memoranda of understanding with these three institutions in the sense that they deal with our own graduates in par with their own graduates. So at least they deal with an AUS graduate, whether it's a biology student or a chemistry student or an engineering student, as if they've graduated from their own institutions, given that AUS is a sister institution to AUB, LAU, and the University of Belmont. So now with that, if my slides cooperate here with me, of course, anybody can apply to a medical school. So I'm not going to bore you with the different disciplines that you can come from with different backgrounds to join a medical school. But as I said, from my own experience, I mean, more than 80% of students do a biology degree, given that, medicine builds on courses in anatomy and physiology, genetics, biochemistry, cell biology, physiology, neuroscience, and the likes, microbiology as well, organic chemistry, of course, biochemistry. So any student at AUS can actually apply to a medical school and get admitted if they fulfill the admission criteria. So let me go over the admission criteria at these three institutions that we have memoranda of understanding with. I'll start with AUB fairly quickly. Of course, I'm not going to bore you with too much details, but I'm going to give you some information here. So the pre-med courses at AUB are the two introductory courses in biology with their labs, introductory chemistry courses with the labs, physics courses with the labs, and then they have the two courses in organic chemistry, which we offer here at AUS. These are, because the students are with us today, Chem 215 and Chem 216. Now, AUB requires the labs of both Organic 1 and Organic 2. So this is 217 and 218 here at AUS. And they also require one course in genetics, which at AUS is Bio 260, the course I teach. Also with the lab, it's a 4-credit course. So I've listed here at the bottom of the slide the exact courses that match the pre-med courses at AUB for our own AUS students. And of course, by you doing a biology degree, automatically, you fulfill all these pre-med courses at AUB. Now, they are a little bit harsher than others, because if you look at LAU, the Lebanese American University, they've added one more component, and that is a course in biochemistry, which again, we offer here at AUS, which is Chem 350. Again, a course that I teach, but they also have one course in genetics, so very similar. Now, when it comes to the second lab in organic chemistry, I think they bargain a little bit. So they don't bargain with organic chemistry lab 1, but with 2, maybe they bargain a little bit. But to make everybody, fulfill all these requirements, we advise our students to do the 2 labs, organic 1 lab and organic 2 lab. These are the courses at the bottom that you see that are equivalent to those courses here at AUS. Now, when you look at the University of Belmont, things start to change a little bit, because at the University of Belmont, they do not require a course in genetics nor a course in biochemistry. That's not part of their pre-med core courses. But of course, typically, they have the 2 introductory courses in biology, chemistry, as well as physics with the labs, of course. And of course, they need organic 1 lab. They don't even require organic 2, which is 216. But 216, organic chemistry 2, the lecture component, is part of our biology program anyway. So any biology student at AUS must take organic 1, organic 2, and organic 1 lab. So they are, fulfilling all the requirements set at the University of Belmont. And that's why probably our students found it a little bit easier to get into the University of Belmont Medical School. Namely, we have 2 students, Sawsan Horani, who joined about 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago now, and Rafif Farjlan, who joined about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So these are 2 students who are now completing their medical education at the University of Belmont. So what I did here, and I'm not going to bore you with this again, I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, and I'm going to keep it for you to ask maybe questions at the end of the session. I'll be more than happy to entertain some questions. So what do biology students at AUS need to do to fulfill the requirements set at AUB, LAU, or by AUB, LAU, and University of Belmont? So you see that on top of what they normally take at AUB, for example, if they want to get admitted to AUB, they need to do Physics 2, which is not part of the biology program with the lab, and Organic 2 lab, which is again not part of the biology program, and so on and so forth. So at LAU, for example, again, they do the same thing. Physics 2 with the lab and Organic 2 lab. This is Chem 218. Sorry for people in North America. These are the course codes at AUS that you see on the slides. Now, what does it take a chemistry major? I know Hiba, for example. Hiba Abid is a chemistry student. She's listening to me right now, I assume, because I saw her name at the beginning. Let's say Hiba wants to join medical school after she completes her chemistry degree. So what does it take Hiba to join AUB medical school? So on top of what Hiba would take in her chemistry program, she would need to take Bio 101, Bio 102, the introductory bio courses with the labs, and genetics, because these three courses are not built into the chemistry program that Hiba is pursuing. What does it take to go LAU? Same thing is listed down below. What about University of Belmont? You see the requirements are a bit less because there's no genetics, no biochemistry requirements. So all what Hiba has to do is Bio 101, Bio 102, and that will allow her to apply to the University of Belmont. Now, what about other disciplines at AUS? So what if somebody majoring in ENV? So you see it here, we have two concentrations, biology and ecosystems concentration and chemistry and analysis concentration. Again, it lists exactly what will you be deficient in if you want to apply to one of these three medical schools in Lebanon, given that your major is environmental sciences. So again, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but of course, as you start deviating away from biology/chemistry, you expect that the number of courses that you need to do or take would be more. It would be a more extensive list, but it's not very extensive given that AUS is a liberal art institution. And as you know, most of our programs, at least in sciences, there are 15 credits of free electives. These 15 credits are equivalent to 5 courses. So for example, just give a quick example. Let's say somebody is doing ENV in the biology and ecosystem concentration, and they want to join AUB. On top of what they do normally in the ENV program, they need to do physics 2 with the lab, organic 2, and organic 2 lab. That's it. 8 credits, which are part of the free electives that are 15 credits. So what I'm trying to say is that they're not wasting any time or anything. They don't have to stay one extra semester or one extra year. They can just apply by taking these courses that they are deficient in. Now, of course, if you go further, you see that people coming from engineering will find it a little bit more difficult, but not super difficult. I would argue that it will take them at least one extra semester, given that in engineering, the number of free electives is not 15 credits like it is in biology or chemistry or E&D. It's like 6 credits only. So only 2 courses. So they need to take a few more courses, maybe during the summer, maybe one extra semester. This is something that they have to decide upon with their academic mentor or academic advisor. But that's what they need to do to join AUB, LAU, University of Belmont. I listed chemical engineering first and foremost, because you know, chemical engineers take a bit more courses in chemistry than other disciplines in engineering, like civil engineering or mechanical engineering, which you see here on the next slide. So I've listed all of them: electrical engineering, civil engineering, computer engineering, mechanical engineering, and even industrial engineering, which is the last addition to the program. So that's what it takes an AUS student majoring in these disciplines to join one of these 3 institutions in Lebanon. Of course, the admission criteria could vary from one institution to another, but what I did here in a bullet slide is to put the most common admission criteria. Now, these values, these percentages are not fixed in stone. They can change from one institution to another. But generally speaking, the way they put on your GPA versus the GPA in the pre-med courses, I think this is something I need to highlight for our students here, because maybe they don't know about it a lot. Some institutions, I know AUB for sure, makes a distinction between your GPA, cumulative GPA, and GPA in the pre-med courses. You know, at AUS, for example, or any other institution, you take a history course here or a music course here, or I don't know what you take. These are not part of the pre-med core courses, correct? But they will be counted towards your GPA. So they make a distinction between your GPA, overall GPA, and your GPA when it comes to the pre-med courses. So they look at your GPA for bio courses, like Bio 101, Bio 102, Chem 101, Chem 102, Physics 1, Physics 2, Genetics, Biochemistry. And they calculate your GPA, because it could be the case that somebody is not doing very well in these pre-med courses, but their overall GPA is above, say, 3.5 for the sake of argument, simply because they got A in history and A in psychology and A in music. And that's why their GPA is high, but they are somewhat weak, if you wish, if you allow me to say so. They're a bit weaker on the sciences, on the pre-med courses. So some institutions actually look at this carefully. I know that the University of Belmont doesn't, but AUB definitely does. The MCAT is worth about 25% to 30% of the overall weight for you to be admitted. So how much weight do they put on the MCAT? Again, with the different parts of the MCAT, which I actually wrote twice when I was in Canada, and I'm very much aware of it, and it had changed, and Dr. Reem will talk about that issue in just a little bit. But overall, institutions put about 25% to 30% weight on the MCAT scores. They actually bargain a little bit with what they call critical analysis or verbal reasoning as the historical terminology, given that our students here in the region are not native English speakers. Most institutions, if not all, have an interview, and that interview is very critical. I think people who make it to the interview have a 50% chance getting admitted ultimately into the pre-med program, or into the medical program, I should say. So if they invite, say, 100 students for the interview, they would admit 50 of the 100. So it's once you have made it to the interview stage, you are in good shape. You have a 50-50 chance getting admitted into the medical school. But again, I'm not going to talk about the nitty-gritty details of these percentages as they differ or vary between one institution or another. Okay, I think I'd stop here, and I'll be more than happy to take some questions at the end of the session, but I'd like to hand this over to Dr. Reem Khalil, who can tell you a little bit about the MCAT and how it changed since April 2015. Dr. Reem.
Thank you, Dr. Amin. That was very helpful. And thank you, Dr. Sarah, for organizing this. So I realize some of this information might overlap with the experts from Princeton Review, so they'll probably give you a lot more details about this. But I'll be talking a little bit about the changes that have been made to the MCAT 2015, as well as courses that you can take to help you improve your performance on the MCAT. So prior to 2015, the Association of American Medical Colleges, along with Howard Hughes Medical Institute, essentially formed a committee to evaluate the pre-medical as well as medical science curricula. And the outcome of the meeting was to make extensive revisions to the MCAT. And so those revisions essentially include several, or accomplished several tasks. One of them is to shift this academic focus away from undergraduate prerequisite courses and more towards specific scientific competencies. Another important revision that was made to the MCAT was to test really the students' critical reasoning skills in scientific context. And then another important aim was to just acknowledge this more integrated model of this bio-psycho social model of health. And so with that, they have an entirely new section that is called the Psychological, Sociological, and Biological Foundations of Behavior. And this new again, section really tests the students' knowledge of concepts as well as critical reasoning regarding the biological as well as social and behavioral determinants of behavior. And so this section, section 3, this is an entirely new section. I will note though, section 4 is not an entirely new section. It actually replaced the old verbal reasoning section. And so the new one is called Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, which really draws on passages from the social sciences and from the humanities. But it's really designed to be self-contained. And again, I think the folks from the Princeton Review will give us a little bit more information on that. And so if you can go to the next slide, Dr. Amin.
Yes, sure.
And so for those who wish to sort of improve their performance on the MCAT, again, AAMC recommends taking an upper level neuroscience course as well as a psych course. And this makes sense because many of the foundational concepts that are covered on the MCAT are actually also covered in a neuro course in a number of neuro courses and an introductory psych course. And so I think most of the students here are aware, or maybe some of them are not aware, but I do offer Principles of Neuroscience, which is Bio 371. That certainly would be very beneficial to those students who are pre-med track students who ultimately want to take the MCAT and go to medical school. And so for those of you who are currently taking it or have taken it in the past, you know of the heavy emphasis that I place on data analysis as well as interpretation of results. And so sort of mastering that aspect of the course would certainly help when it comes to taking the MCAT. So in addition to the neuroscience course, I'm also offering a new special topics course that's called Sensory Perception. That's Bio 394. That will be offered next semester. And this is entirely based on sensory systems. And so the course really examines how humans perceive, process, as well as or sense, process, and perceive the environment and how these sensory functions are generated and modified. And so, of course, in addition to that, there are psych courses that our pre-med track students should take, as well as sociology courses, because these are certainly recommended by the AAMC. And so if you continue to the next slide, Dr. Amin. And so again, the MCAT revision that was made really emphasizes 10 foundational scientific concepts and 7 analytical and critical reasoning skills. And so if you look at the table on the left here on your screen, that's essentially those 10 foundational concepts, as well as the 7 analytical and critical reasoning skills. And if you look on the table on the right, and if you see the foundational concepts, as well as the 2015 MCAT neuroscience related content, you can see the column that says new to MCAT. So all these that are checked off are new foundational concepts that have been added to the 2015 MCAT. And you can see in subsequent columns which courses actually cover these foundational concepts. So I realize this is a little bit small, I apologize, but I hope everybody can see it. So for instance, where it says bio in that column, this is meant to be the bio introductory courses. So bio 101, bio 102, and you can see that some of these are covered in introductory bio courses, some of these foundational concepts. And then BC stands for biochemistry course. So some of these concepts are also covered in the biochem course. GC are general chemistry courses. And you can see, the overwhelming number of foundational concepts that are new to 2015 MCAT are covered in a psych course. And I will just note one important fact is that these foundational concepts are certainly covered in a psych course, but taking a neuroscience course or even an upper level, for instance, sensory perception course, will go into more detail regarding these foundational concepts. So for instance, sensory processing and all the sensory systems, that's all covered, of course, in the neuro course and will be covered in more detail in the sensory processing course. And so I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to give any more details. I'll just leave it up to the to Raitu and Jennifer to talk more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Amin, and thank you, Reem, so far for your introductions. I just had one more thing to say to you before we go on to the MCAT preparation. Dr. Amin, if you don't mind just taking us to the next slide, please. So I know that many of our students would want to go to American schools or Canadian schools or schools in Lebanon and otherwise that obviously follow a very similar format to AUS. But we do have some students who may be interested in going to the UK or to Europe. And certainly we have had students and we currently do have students who are in graduate medical schools across the UK and Europe. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview of those, just again for your own information. So you can go into a medical school in the UK, and it's called a graduate entry medical school. And these are usually 4 or in some cases 5 years, whereby the early years are at the university. So you would be on campus taking various courses, obviously. And then the final 2 years would actually be in hospitals or GP surgeries. So it's the clinical phase. So although it's a 4-year degree as such, only 2 years are spent at the university, and the rest of the time you're actually in your rotations and doing clinical work. Again, the entry requirements differ depending on the university, but in general, what you might find is that you might need a 2-1 or a 2-2 in any discipline. So these equate to a GPA of 3 and above, or a GPA of 2.8 and above, depending on the medical school, of course. And again, this is in any discipline, just to refer back to what Dr. Amin had said at the start about the fact that you can really come from any kind of background degree. And in addition to these entry requirements, you obviously have to take an interview and potentially additional tests. And there are several of those in the UK, but one common one is the Graduate Medical School Admissions Test, or the GAMSAT, which is very similar to the MCAT in many ways. Can I ask you to move on, please, Dr. Amin? So just to tell you about the GAMSAT, it is again divided into a number of sections that assess performance in reasoning, in humanities and social sciences, written communication, and reasoning in biological and physical sciences. So you can see that the format again is very similar to the MCAT, which means that if you are a pre-med or if you're a biology student or you've taken a lot of the pre-med courses at AUS, you'll do pretty well on those, obviously, with the addition of the sociology and the psychology and neuroscience and other courses that Dr. Reem has referred to. This test is offered twice a year in March and September. And if you would like to take a picture of this, this is an information booklet that's been updated for 2021 that gives you the latest information on the GAMSAT. Now, a lot of you may have questions about how does the GAMSAT versus the MCAT sit, considering that they're obviously quite close in terms of areas of assessment and so on. The general consensus seems to be that the GAMSAT is more of a test of logical reasoning, and the MCAT is more of a test of knowledge. So perhaps in some cases, a lot of people might say the MCAT is more difficult than the GAMSAT. Potentially, I guess, depending on how your logical reasoning sits, I guess. But certainly, entry into medical school in general, whether it's in the UK, in Europe, in North America, etc., is very competitive. And, you need to be at the top of your game. You need to be doing well in your courses. You obviously need to be pursuing any areas of preparation to enable you to be competitive when it comes to these medical schools. So just the last slide that I've got here, I've put our email addresses for Dr. Amin, for Dr. Reem, and for myself. We are more than happy to advise you and assist you when it comes to the courses that you need to take for your pre-med and for your MCAT preparation. So please feel free to contact us at any time. So I think I'm going to leave it. Yes, Dr. Amin,
before
go
you
ahead.
hand it over to Richu and Jennifer, if I can just say something fairly quickly, 2 quick points. One is, aside from the pre-med courses that I've listed here throughout the presentation, and the ones that we always talk about, I would like our students to be aware that we also offer some upper division courses that are very much directly related to you studying medicine. Namely, as Dr. Reem mentioned, she teaches a course in neuroscience. Dr. Naveed Khan, the head of our department, teaches a microbiology course, which is very important, along with medical parasitology. Dr. Sarah teaches a course in pharmacology, which is very, very, very integral to the study of medicine. And I myself teach a course in immunology. And we do hear from our students who joined medical schools already how valuable these courses are, because their first 2 years, more or less, is just going over some material that they have already studied at AUS. So these are very valuable courses that students have access to. if they have the prerequisites for to take as part of what we call the major electives, as you all know, with aside from microbiology being a core course, it's a major requirement. That's point number one. The second point quickly is that, yes, maybe I spoke primarily about the 3 institutions in Lebanon, and Dr. Sarah talked about some institutions maybe in the UK or in Europe in general. But we also have some schools in the Caribbean that follow the North American model of education, namely Saba University, the American University of the Caribbean, St. George University. One of our very early graduates, Wamaka, her name is Amy. They call her Amy. Her name is Wamaka. She's Nigerian. She actually completed her medical degree at St. George University. And now she's a practicing physician in Qatar, in one of the hospitals. Some of my colleagues, when I was in Canada, actually went to Saba University, and now they're practicing medicine in different parts of Canada and different parts of the States. So I just wanted to highlight that there's a room for many institutions that our students can apply to, not just the 3 medical schools in Lebanon or some of them in Europe and the UK, but there are many actually in the Caribbean with, I should say, much less stringent requirements. It's a bit easier to get into the Caribbean schools, but at the end of the day, you become a doctor and you can become, certified to work in North America. That's what I wanted to add. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Amin. All right, so why don't I leave it up to you, and then we'll take our students' questions at the end.
Jennifer, would you like to share the presentation?
Sure. And Dr. Amin, I think if you could stop sharing your screen, and then I'll share mine. Oh, there we go.
Did we lose connection or something?
I think, can you hear me? You should be seeing my screen.
Now I do, yes.
Okay, all good.
Yes.
So we can,
And just give it
Yeah.
1 minute.
so you can select yes from the beginning.
It usually takes a moment. We'll give it another minute, but let me just tell you what I'll be taking you through. And first of all, thank you for having us here. Really appreciate opportunity. I love talking about the MCAT in our program, so I always appreciate the opportunity to do that. There we go. And my name is Jennifer Waddell, and I've been working for the Princeton Review for, it's got to be over 20 years now. And largely in an MCAT capacity. So I'm the assistant MCAT content director for our course as a whole, and also the lead developer for the CARS. When I say CARS, it's critical analysis and reasoning skills, which I'm going to call CARS from now on. And I work a bit on the LSAT side as well, but most of what I do is MCAT development related, and I teach in our courses and for the CARS section, and train people to teach our courses, and train people to teach our courses. So I'm pretty much involved in all aspects of our course. So what I'll be talking with you today about is just basics about the MCAT itself, then a little bit more about, some of which has already been covered, about what the MCAT itself is testing, and then how you should be preparing for it. And then we'll talk a little bit within that context about the Pathways course itself. And then I'll turn it over to Ritu at that point, and she can answer any questions that you have about our courses. Literally, the MCAT is the Medical College Admissions Test. I'm going to call it the AAMC from now on. It's the association that administers the test. And it is required by all US and Canadian medical schools, and for both MD and DO programs. So whichever program you're applying to, it's going to require the MCAT. A little bit about then just the logistical aspects of it. The next administration is going to be January 2021. Skips February, and then several test dates up until September, and then there's a gap until January of the next year. There's usually between 2 and 4 dates per month that the test is given. You can only be registered for one at a time, and there is now a limit on how often you can take the test. So if you're just starting your preparation and about to take it next year or later, not something you really need to worry about. But if you have taken it before, something you want to keep in mind, that it's 3 times a year, 4 times in 2 consecutive years, and then 7 times total in your lifetime. Oops, and hold on just a second. So my odd screen has reappeared. I'm going to ignore it. There's a box, I think that's appearing. We'll just pretend it's not there. That's going away now. So in terms of testing centers, if you are taking it outside of the United States or Canada, just have the different places listed, countries listed that currently you can take the MCAT. I have Lebanon in parentheses because currently it's not being given conditions in the country. Next year is up in the air. But you can see that there's no current testing sites in the UAE, but those are the places that are currently available. And let's see. So logistics, again, that make sure that you get to the testing center on the early side. What I would recommend is contact your testing center and ask them when you should get there. They may want you to get there earlier, before 30 minutes before. That depends a bit on the COVID situation as well, in terms of where you're taking and what the situation is at the time. In the past, they were asking people to get there, say, an hour before, but I think that's changing a bit given that they don't want as many people in the waiting room anymore. But currently, there's a 7:30 a.m. local time and a 3 p.m. start time. So count on at least 30 minutes before that time. So as you can imagine, if you're taking it in the morning, then that's going to be really early and you want to plan for that. And if you're taking it in the afternoon, then you're going to be going fairly late. Take into account if you're a morning person or a night person when you're signing up for a time, because it can affect your performance as well. It's not that everybody starts at the same time, by the way. So you show up for your testing time, and then they call in people one after the other, depending on how many testing rooms they have. So you may be in the waiting room for some period of time and people are being called. Usually they call in the people who sign in first and then each person after that. There's a lot of security, so just be prepared for that. In terms of identification, most places will use a palm, scanning the veins in your palm, or they may use some other security system. But one important thing to know is that you can't have anything to eat or drink in the testing room. And therefore, if you're taking practice tests, you want to do your practice test in the exact same way. Don't have even water available. You'll have that in a locker outside the testing room, accessible during the breaks. And I'll show you the testing schedule in a minute. But you don't want to be practicing with like snacks or anything to drink during this section, because you won't have that available during the actual test. And you will be taking on a computer. And I'll show you a picture of how the test is displayed in a moment. You'll have a noteboard and a pen. It's a wet erase noteboard, meaning that you will be able to take notes. You can get a new noteboard whenever you like by turning in your old one, and they'll give you a pen to use on it. So another thing you want to make sure that you're practicing with is either something similar to that, or at least scratch paper with a pen, so that you, when you're taking your practice test, that you're practicing in a way that's very similar, at least, to how you'll be taking the actual MCAT. In general, you want to make sure that you're reproducing your actual testing circumstances as much as you can in any kind of practice that you do. And it will most likely be on a desktop. You will have an external mouse And that's important to have as well, because it's a different physical action to use a touchpad than to use an external mouse. So again, along the lines of make it as realistic as possible. Get an external mouse, always use it whenever you're doing practice tests. And I keep referring to practice tests. It's important to take as many practice tests as you can so that you're fully prepared, not just with your content knowledge, but with your actual strategies for taking the test before you take your MCAT. So this is what it looks like. You've got a passage on the left, and this would be true for science passages as well, and then a single question on the right. If it's a freestanding question, which you have for the sciences, but not for cars, then it would just be the freestanding question on the right. You can only see then one question at a time, and you can navigate through in a variety of ways. So this is the current testing day. And I won't take you step by step through it, but you can see the tutorial is the tools, the testing tools that you have. Then you've got Chem Phys first, you've got a break, then cars, then you have a 30-minute lunch break, then biochem, another break, and then psych-soc at the end, and then some other administrative stuff at the end. So it's a long day, about 7.5 hours you could expect. So again, important to take as many full-length practice tests as you can so you're prepared, not just for the content of the test, but just the physical and mental endurance you're going to need on your actual MCAT. So the COVID schedule, I'm not even going to talk about because they had changed it for a shorter testing day. They're now officially going back to the full-length tests on those 2 testing slots. So this should not be applicable to next year. Everything is up in the air a little bit. So I would keep an eye on that. And if you're planning to take the test next year, just so you know what your exact schedule will be. But you should, at least for now, expect to have the full-length test. So those are the 4 sections that I just ran through the testing day. And they're all scored the same in terms of the scaled score. When I say raw score, I mean just the total number, right? Scaled score is always on a 118 to 132 scale. And then you've got the combined score, composite score, which is also reported. And as has already been mentioned, it's a very competitive process. So here are some numbers from current year, 2019 to 2020. So the number of applications, total applicants, given that most people apply to, it's a good idea, 15, 16, 17 schools. And you can see less than half of that matriculants, meaning people who are actually matriculating. So it is a very competitive process. In terms of scores then, what you want to be shooting for, these are the averages. You can see for applicants, the average score, total score, about 506. For matriculants, people actually entering into medical school, about 511. That's the composite score. You see some numbers about the GPA as well. So something you should be shooting for to have a good chance is basically 510 or above. The actual numbers in terms of your chances of getting it, it's going to depend a lot on the school as well. As has already been discussed, some schools are more competitive than others. So something you want to keep in mind when you're deciding where to apply, like where you have, you always want to go for your dream schools and your kind of more, safety schools and then schools in the middle. But it's good to keep in mind what their averages are and then what your GPA is, and then how you're testing on your MCAT. So this gives you an idea of the score, the percentile ranking, which tells you really how you stack up against other people who are applying. So you can see with the red box there, when you get into 510, that's when you get 509, and but so where you get into the 80s. So this will give you a good idea of what scores actually mean. You get into the 90s when you hit 514. So 514, 515, that would be considered a pretty competitive score, even for a fairly competitive school. So let's talk a little bit more about the MCAT itself, and some of this has been covered already. And that change in 2015, definitely it went to focusing more on reasoning skills, even for the sciences, than it always had tested in the modern era of the MCAT, at least. It was never just pure content knowledge. Like, you know, you had to apply your knowledge of physics to a passage, for example. And with 2015, what changed even more was it became a much more biology focused test, and even more like applying your knowledge of the other sciences in a biological context. So the names reflected that. It used to just be chemistry and physics, and now it's chemical and physical foundations of biological systems. Critical analysis and reasoning skills, they changed the name from verbal reasoning, but the section actually did not change. It's the one section that didn't really change. But then biological and biochemical foundations of living systems, biochemistry became even more emphasized, is even more emphasized now than it was before. And then again, you've got psych-soc, I'm going to call it psych-soc, but psychological, social, and biological foundations of behavior. So again, it's really important when you're preparing that you're not just learning physics and learning OChem and learning GChem, that you're learning how to apply those in a biological context, and how to not just have the content knowledge, but how to use the information that they give you when you have a science passage. Because a lot of the questions for the sciences have to do with combining your content knowledge that you're bringing in with your analysis of the passage and answering questions that require a combination of those two things. Prerequisites, actually, I'm gonna move through this quickly because this has pretty much been covered extensively. So I'm gonna move past this. And this goes back to that it's not just content knowledge. So for the sciences, the different skills that they're testing, there's your knowledge, but then your capacity to do problem solving using reasoning. Also about research design and experimental design. There's a fair number of questions in the different science sections that have to do with that. And then they'll often, for example, for the sciences, give you data in the passage that you then have to, or statistics or study results, experimental results, that you then have to apply your own reasoning to answer the questions. For CARS, critical analysis and reasoning skills, it's purely passage-based, so it's very different. It was put earlier as like a freestanding section. It's very, very different than the science sections. So no outside knowledge is being tested, which is good because the passages can come from anywhere in the social sciences and humanities. It's about half and half between the two. If you had to actually know everything there is to know about the social sciences and humanities to do well, that would be literally impossible. So it's basically an open book test. Every piece of information you're going to need to answer the questions is given to you on the screen in the passage or in the question. So you have to make a shift basically when you move from Chem Phys to CARS, and then you have to remind yourself, okay, outside knowledge no longer applicable. And then when you move from CARS to biochem, now you're back in the world where you're using all of your content knowledge. So you want to make a very conscious shift in how you're approaching the questions when you're doing CARS, that you're not, if you happen to know anything about the content, you can't use that. That can even lead you into wrong answers. If you try and answer based on what you know, it's always given in the passage. Pacing is key, pacing and time management. Most people find the CARS section to be the most time pressured section. So that should be a big part of your preparation, learning how to manage your time and how much you can reasonably do in the amount of time that you have. And it's really all about active reading, how you're reading the passage material, how you're reading the questions and the answer choices. So active reading in a lot of different ways. So you're going to be learning how to read differently in the different phases of doing the passage, which is crucial for CARS in particular. And then understanding the questions, knowing what kind of questions they are going to be asking you, what kind of task they're giving you for the different question types, and then the very methodical process you need to follow to answer those questions most efficiently. So as you can tell from what I'm saying, a lot of CARS is about, not just CARS, but the test as a whole is about strategy. You have your content knowledge that you're bringing in with you from the courses you've taken, from any MCAT course that you take. But it's strategy is key. It's all, CARS is all strategy, but it's important for the sciences as well. So you have to incorporate that into your preparation. So I want to tell you then about the Pathways course for MCAT preparation. So these are the classes that are included within it. So you can see 6 biology. We always have the most classes in biology, given that so much on this test is about biology. And then 3 Gen Chem, 2 OChem, 2 Physics, 5 Psych Soc, and then we have 4 CARS classes. They're all 3-hour classes, so you can see the hours and how they add up. Also, the course includes office hours. And that's a great opportunity to communicate even more directly with your teacher. Our classes are very interactive. So it's not just somebody lecturing. We have a dedicated classroom program. So we don't do our classes through Zoom. We do it through our own program, where you'll see it's very interactive and active on the screen. There's a chat function. Students can ask and answer questions throughout the course. So it's not just going to be a teacher lecturing at you for 3 hours. There's it's very, you know, you have a lot of opportunity to communicate during the class, but office hours even more so, when you basically can ask any question that you have about the materials, science topics, practice tests, and all of that. And teachers may review certain topics that students are requesting as well. So for the Pathways course, there's 1 per subject, so adding up to 6 total. And just a little bit more about what's included in the course. So you've got 11 books, which you see some pictures of to the right, 16 full-length practice tests. You've got score reports, which I'll show you a little bit about how those function, because they're incredibly useful. Drill builder modules, which let you personalize your preparation. And right above that, you see online passage drills. Each subject is going to have a huge number of practice passages that are available to you, that they're all function just like a passage on the real test. The Medflix videos are teachers teaching segments of the material. And there's also teachers walking you through passages. So they're incredibly useful for, let's say there's a topic that you feel a little weaker on that was covered in class, or if there's something that's not covered in class, you'll have the Medflix videos to fill in, either reinforce, review, and fill in that content. And the way the course is structured, there will be explicit recommendations for, you know, here's the material that's covered, here's the videos you are required to watch for the class, and then here's videos and other materials you should use to like round out your preparation. So there's a lot of guidance. I'm talking here mostly for the sciences in terms of topics, but there's videos for CARS as well that cover all the different strategies. So again, it's all laid out for you in terms of what you'll be covering in class, and then what you should be adding to that with all these resources to make sure that you're fully prepared. Also, you're going to have access to all the AAMC online resources. That's 4 scored practice tests and an unscored test, but a bunch of different banks of passage drills. So there's additional passages through that. And then they have a new CARS self-evaluation tool, which is useful as well. So basically anything that the AAMC provides, you'll have access to through the course. So I just wanted to show you a little bit about the dashboard or portal and the kind of resources that you have there. Some of these pictures, by the way, are taken from a teacher version of it. So these kind of weird ups and downs you're seeing in this person's score report is not an actual student. But when you log in, you'll see some basics in terms of your goals and your recent performance. And then in this reports, this will show you, you can kind of see under question format with the colored boxes, gives you an idea of what you need to, what you're doing well on and what you could use some more work on, where your strengths and weaknesses are, basically. So this is a closer look at physics. So you can see for the different topics, and they'll break it down this way for each of the sciences. For cars, it's all about question types, and it'll show your strengths and weaknesses there. And so this is for the score report. You'll be able to compare, track your progress. These downs for the student was when this person just took like a single section of the test. So it's easy to tell if they took the full test or not. But it's a nice way of tracking your composite score there and seeing, you know, how you're doing and if you're making progress towards your goal. And then the actual score report for the test has various functions. So this is what it would look like for, this is the chemical and physical foundations of biological systems section. Tells you right and wrong answers if you flagged a question. And then when you click on one of those, it'll bring up a full explanation for that question, which I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. So that's one view of it. And then if you click on category view, it'll break it down by topic. So you have a good view of your strengths and weaknesses there. This is for physics. And then format, this would be question format. And you can see here for physics and biology. Again, it just gives you a variety of angles on your performance so you can see where you're doing well and where you need more work. And this is if you clicked on a question, it will bring up, so the highlighting there is the students highlighting. So it'll let you see what you highlighted in the passage and the question. And then here, this person got this question right. So it shows the correct answer. If they had picked a different answer, it would show that as well. And then there's a full explanation down here for the question type and why the right answer is right and why the wrong answers are wrong. So I think here, Ritu, I think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much for your detailed presentation. Good evening, students. Thank you so much for joining us today evening. I'll try to make this short. I know it's been a long day at your university. So we are sharing you a gist of our Pathways program. Of course, more details to come along with Dr. Sarah and her team. But we wanted to keep this opportunity available for you, as all the faculty and our team, from the US, Ms. Jennifer, has spoken that this MCAT course is definitely going to build on your knowledge of what are you currently studying. I know there are many students from different faculty, but assuming that it's, of course, majority of the students are from the biology department, this MCAT program is going to build on what you're learning. So we kept that in mind, that we should have a strategy which should be more focused towards your test taking and, of course, revising the concepts that you need to know in order to master the MCAT exam. So that's how the MCAT Pathways program came into place. And so we welcome you to write to us, as well as along with Dr. Sarah, about your interest to join this program, the MCAT Pathways. And we've kept the registration open until December 31st, so that we have ample of time before we start the program, when you're back to your campus in the spring semester, that we welcome you to the orientation. We also welcome you to taking a pre-assessment. Yes, we would have to do a pre-assessment very similar and almost to the length of the exam, which is 7.5 hours. So hence we have dedicated a week after you come back in spring on Jan 31st, that you would have a pre-assessment week, followed by a schedule that starts from February 13th. And we know that you have a very busy schedule with your university classes. So we have tried to keep one session on your weekend on a Saturday and one session on the weekday, Tuesday. But of course, we're happy to take in your feedback through Dr. Sarah and be able to change the dates. Of course, we need ample of time in advance to be able to make those, while it looks like a minute change, but of course it goes back to our scheduling with our faculty in the US. So as Ms. Jennifer presented, that each session is 3 hours long. So you would be having your classes twice a week, a Saturday or a Tuesday. And we're presenting this tentative schedule. It would start from February 13th until May 8th. Now, we are mindful of the fact that many of you are still considering different destinations for medical schools. Like while we were receiving a presentation from Professor Amin, I was looking up at the deadlines of the universities in Lebanon. So you have to be very mindful what are your deadlines, and according to that, you would start your preparation course. And so this is a general schedule for anyone who is aiming for an MCAT test in the month of June or July or September. So it starts in February and it ends in May, and then you have either a month before you take your official exam in June, or 2 months or 3 months over the summer between July and September. And we have managed to make sure that we give you a special discount as AUS students. So we would appreciate that we start with a group of 20 students, and this is the fees per student. And once again, Jennifer, if you would like to go to the next slide. These are our details. So as Score Plus, we have been in the region since last 20 years. Like Jennifer, I'm also turning in my 20th year in Princeton Review Score Plus, and we are in all cities across UAE. We are even across the region in Qatar, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, and we have our closest branch to your university campus, which is Sharjah, and we're closer to Buhaira Corniche. And these are the office details. So if you are interested in an MCAT program, I would recommend that, yes, please get in touch with Dr. Sarah, and you can even copy us at servicesharjah@scorePlusEducation.com. Of course, your interest would be forwarded to AUS faculty. So please keep both entities in copy. So we know that you would be interested to join our program. But yes, this is what I would like to conclude by, is that we are really honored to be considered as a collaborator with AUS to really enhance the support AUS is providing to US students. And I really appreciate your time today. You've spent through the process of learning about medical schools outside of you know UAE, and of course we look forward to continuing this conversation. So thank you so much, Dr. Sarah, Professor Khalil, Professor Amin, and thank you, Jennifer, for your time. I know it's early morning for you, so thank you so much. Dr. Sarah, we are open to Q&A
Yes,
about the Princeton
yes,
Review
sure.
program, so Jennifer and I can answer questions as Princeton Review representatives, and yeah.
Sure. Thank you, Ritu, and thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, Dr. Amin and Dr. Reem, and obviously all of our students who have, and other faculty members who have been participating. So I'm hopeful that you managed to hear from us how AUS can help you and how we can help you in terms of advising with regards to courses at AUS that should help you with your pre-med track. And certainly Princeton Reviews, as you heard, could really help you with your MCAT preparation and with honing your skills to get the best outcome possible in order for you to hopefully get to your dream schools. So all I'd like to do now is to leave it up to our students or anybody who has questions. If you would like to raise your hand now, I can see that there's a reactions tab at the bottom, and I think there's, instead of a hand raise, a thumb raise. So if you'd like to press on that, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to use the chat box and put your question there, I'd be more than happy to put that out to the group as well. So I have a question here that says, what GPA should the students aim for? So maybe Jennifer, that could be best addressed to you. So what do you think the GPA that they should aim for?
And I can go back to that chart in a moment if needed, but it depends so much on the schools that you are applying for and you hope to get into. So I would hate to give like a generic answer to that. So what I would recommend is take a look, think about the schools that are in that range, like schools you would like to attend, and the top and the dream schools, the safety schools, and schools will always publish their averages, their average MCAT scores, and their GPAs. So the best thing to do would be to take a look at the schools you're interested in and see what their numbers are, and that'll give you a good idea of kind of where you stand for that.
So roughly, I mean, would you agree if we say 3.0 and above, but even for the more competitive schools, 3.5 and above?
Actually, from my experience, and as Jennifer mentioned correctly, this all depends on which school you apply to. So let me break this into three categories. The top-notch institutions, I'd say if your GPA is less than 3.5, forget it. These are very competitive schools that I'm talking about here. The second tier, if you wish, I'd say a GPA of 3.3 and above should put you in a safe position to apply and have a good chance of being admitted. For the lower kind of the third tier of schools, I'd say maybe, yes, a GPA of 3.0 and above would be sufficient. Although, I mean, it's all competitive. So if it depends on that year of application. So if the application pool has, say, 3,000 students and they accept only, say, 50 students or 80 students or 100 students, then obviously they're going to go from the top to the bottom. I mean, for you to have a good chance, in my view, overall, despite the variation among schools, to have a good chance to be admitted, I think the GPA of 3.3 is a minimum requirement in my view. But again, it varies a lot.
Okay. We have a question here about whether the students should take the MCAT in the senior year or after they have met all of their pre-med courses.
Actually, I don't know if the question is directed to me, but it depends on, and I think Richu or Jennifer mentioned something about this. They need to be vigilant of the deadlines to apply. So some schools have a deadline in December, some have it in January, some have it in February, in March, maybe in May or June, for the fall cycle I'm talking about. So this has nothing to do with their pre-med or pre-med requirements, the core courses. This has to do with the due date that they're applying to. Of course, the later they do it within that deadline time frame, the better, because they will be exposed to maybe second, third year courses along the lines of microbiology courses, cell biology, biochemistry, neuroscience, genetics, you name it. They will be more prepared. But again, it's better to write it, in my view, at the end of their third year. So in the summer of their third year is the best time for them to write the MCAT.
Okay. Michael has put on the chat room basically a search engine where you could look at specific schools in North America and the GPA that is needed for each school. So if you want to know more about that, please go to the chat room. I do have a question here about whether AUS offers medicine as a major, and the answer is no, we don't have a major in medicine. But as we've mentioned, we use the American model in terms of doing the pre-med, and then you could certainly sit for the MCAT and go to a university university within the UAE or Lebanon or Europe or America or Canada or wherever. There's a question here about, does the MCAT result come out immediately after finishing the test? Jennifer, would I go back to you on that? Do you get the result as soon as you're done sitting the test?
Unfortunately, no. There's a waiting period. Currently, actually, for the it's usually about a month. For the January test next year, they've shortened it to about 2 weeks. But if you're taking it later in next year, you should expect about a month.
All right. I have another question about how would I know which courses to take if I plan to go to medical school in the United States? So for that student, do you mean what courses to take at AUS if you're planning to go to medical school, and what is your major? Biology. Okay, so as we'd mentioned, the biology program prepares you very well to go into medical school and to kind of fulfill the pre-med requirements. If there are any other specific courses for a specific medical school that you're interested in, just go into the kind of school entry requirements to check those. But in terms of, you know, the general biology degree and how well you do in that, and then other entry requirements such as the interview and the MCAT. Okay, so
Dr.
these are
Sarah,
kind of,
if I
yes,
may interject here
yes,
and mention
please.
to our own students, because AUS is in the UAE, Jennifer would know, Richo would know that there are also residency requirements for some institutions. So if you apply to a medical school in Texas, I mean, I don't know, there's a certain percentage, so maybe they accept 90% of the students from the state of Texas, and maybe there is like 5% chance for people who are US citizens but outside of Texas, and then maybe 2% or 5% for international students. So if you apply international to a US or a Canadian institution, the already competitive admission, it becomes even much more fierce and much more competitive, given the residency requirements.
Right.
Yes,
I
I
have a
second,
yes,
Professor. I
sir.
mean, it's a relatively competitive application process for international students applying to U.S. or Canadian schools. And I think you rightly said the way the matriculation works is really, as you described, how Texan schools accept applications. So it's to their state students and then out of state, and then a quota is kept for international students. And to answer a previous question, what's a GPA requirement? I think I get that as a question even from a high school student or even from a university student. Medical as a medicine as a degree program is competitive, so your GPA is an indicator of your AUS GPA is an indicator of how well you're going to perform even in your medical school. So a higher GPA would play a very big role in competing with competitive students. This is number one. And also, if that university, as Professor Amin said, you need to do your research really well. If that university is even open to accepting you for scholarships, and GPA, and along with MCAT score is tied in together for scholarship opportunities. Once again, for scholarship, you must research which universities offer that to you as an international student.
I have a question here that if somebody did their MCAT in their third year at AUS, will the MCAT score still be applicable for the following year, obviously after they graduate?
Yeah, and I can take that. Most schools will want it in the past 3 years. So definitely the next year is perfectly fine.
All right. There's a question from Hamad asking, is there a specific website to use to register for an official MCAT exam?
And I'll take that as well. Yes, it's the aamc.org.
Okay, Muhammad, did you get that? aamc.org.
I'll type it in.
Yeah. And are there other countries in Europe that have the 4-year MD program? You mean the graduate program, Jad? you have to look into that, but certainly in the UK it does exist and they're quite prevalent. You can find them in lots of different different universities that have the graduate medical program. For various places in Europe, you'll have to check. Dr. Emin, are you aware if
Yes.
the one that Sylvie went to, was that a graduate
Yeah,
medical program?
there are a bunch of schools in Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Greece, as well as in Cyprus. I know these three countries have such a postgraduate entry into medical school.
Yeah, and we have students already there actually.
Yes.
So they've graduated from the biology degree and went on there.
Yes.
Do we need to take the MCAT for the UK? So again, the requirements differ. It's not the MCAT, but equivalent admission tests like the GAMSAT, as I mentioned, or some universities specify other admission tests. So it's not the MCAT for the UK, but other equivalent tests. As we mentioned, you can take the MCAT more than once, but there are restrictions. Jennifer, would you mind if you just tell us about those again? How many times you can take that?
Sure. It's 3 times in 1 year, 4 times in 2 consecutive years, and 7 times in your entire lifetime.
Thank you. I have a question from Noof. Is it recommended to take different non-science courses as free electives after meeting your medical school requirements, as many medical schools look for more well-rounded individuals?
Sorry, I did not get the question.
Yeah.
So they're asking whether taking more non-science courses, so if you meet the pre-med requirements in terms of all of the sciences, is it recommended to take more non-science courses as free electives? Would that make you look more of a well-rounded individual?
Well, not for you to be admitted into a medical school per se, but that will definitely help you a lot with the MCAT, especially if these courses are in the psychology, sociology, anthropology area of humanities and social sciences. Absolutely, but not an admission requirement.
If you know the name of that university in Greece, Dr. Emin, do you mind if you put it in the chat room for us?
Not on the top of my head, but I will look into it. And yeah, Jeslie, I think Jeslie Lewis, if you can
Yes.
email me, I will look into this and I'll send you the specific name of the institutions in Greece as well as in Eastern Europe.
So I have a first year student here who's asking, what do I focus on for now? Before I start working on my MCAT, obviously, if this is a first year student, they can't apply at the moment.
My advice to freshmen is always the same. Do very well in your introductory bio courses, chemistry courses, physics courses. Do well in your genetics, biochemistry, cell biology, physiology, anatomy, physiology. Do well with your courses. Make sure your GPA is sound. Don't worry about the MCAT for now. By you doing well in your own courses, this is partially preparation for the MCAT. As Jennifer mentioned, I mean, and Richu, I mean, the MCAT examines you on concepts that are discussed in the pre-med core courses, and that's why they are pre-med core courses to begin with.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I just add one thing to that. I would also recommend make sure you are taking, if possible, some humanities and social science courses, because that will prepare you for the kind of reading you're going to have in the CARS section. Not for content, but a way of thinking, a way of reading that's different than the sciences to some extent. Statistically, people coming from who are majoring in humanities and social sciences actually do better on the MCAT, and not just in the CARS section, because you're learning skills through those courses that help you with the kind of reasoning that you need to do even for the science sections. So it's another thing I would recommend.
I totally agree with Jennifer. The reason why I didn't mention it, because AUS is a liberal art institution. So students by definition have to take 4 courses in English and writing and communication, plus what we call general education courses. So they must select from a basket of humanities and social sciences, 15 credits or so. These are 5 courses. So at AUS, the students are, I must claim, are more well-rounded. and they are prepared for taking the MCAT when it comes to the social sciences. Of course, we still advise them highly after 2015 to really take good courses in psychology and sociology.
Thank you. Any other questions, guys? Righto, if you don't mind, do you mind in the chat box if you put that email address that they can maybe communicate with you if they need to find out more about the MCAT prep courses?
Dr. Sarah.
Thank you. I have another couple of questions coming up here. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of US accredited medical schools, since it plays a role when deciding which schools to apply for? Okay, so are you thinking, how does the US medical school stand, in relation to other schools? Do you like to answer that, Dr. Amin?
I don't quite understand the question. I don't mind answering it, but is it how do the US medical schools look at AUS graduates?
No,
Our accreditation or their own accreditation?
I think from what I understand, she's asking about how the US medical schools stand, as a whole when deciding what school to go for.
Oh, you
to
mean
apply for.
internationally compared? Well, from my own perspective, they are in the top of the list, number one on the list.
Yes, I would agree. We have another question here about, would taking a psychology minor be better than dividing the free electives on courses like sociology and other courses?
I really like the question, but the word sociology is of great importance. When you do a minor in psychology, you do Psych 101, you do maybe Psych 250, and then you select 3 courses at 300 level or above from the psychology courses. This will still leave you with some room, believe it or not, of free electives that you can take maybe 1 or 2 sociology courses. So this will not prolong or postpone your graduation, but I will definitely suggest that somebody does a minor in psychology to boost their skills going into the MCAT.
So we've only got a couple of minutes here, so I'll just take on our final questions. We do have a question about whether medical schools look for research experience or internships. Jennifer, I don't know if that's something you could answer. Is that something that's seen as preferential or a must or none at all?
Definitely that it's good. I mean, the more they're really looking for, are you showing dedication to the field? Have you, so having research experience, doing an internship, following a doctor, doing anything that you can do that, first of all, is going to give you more experience that will help you in your future career, but also that will definitely be something schools are looking for. So yeah, beyond just your GPA and your MCAT scores and all of that, they will definitely look very closely at that additional kind of experience. So definitely yes.
Actually, if I can add to this, Dr. Sarah, I totally agree with Jennifer. I don't know of any North American institution who does not ask for extracurricular activities, like some kind of volunteer work or internship or research. Now, when it comes to research in particular, I am aware of many programs in North America that they call MD/PhD. So you go into the MD program, but you end up being also a PhD holder. And in that case, doing research pre-hand is a plus, is a great advantage to the applicants.
Thank you. I have a question here about if an American medical school requires an applicant to have studied at an American college, would that include AUS? So you would obviously be applying as an international student, if I understand this correctly. So you can certainly apply to an American medical school, but you would be looked at as an international student. However, you would be an advantage in some sort because you understand the American model and you've been through an American accredited university.
Unless you're absolutely right, Dr. Sarah, unless the student holds a US citizenship. I mean, this could play a factor.
Right. Yes, I agree. Any other questions, guys? So yes, we said that doing research would be beneficial for medical school, whether you do research, whether you do an internship, whether you're involved in extracurricular activities and so on, then, you know, all of those would benefit your application into medical school. And if we take one last question, should I use my free electives to take the extra courses that I need?
What
And
what is the student major? Muhammad, what is your major? Or sorry, is this yes,
Muhammad,
Muhammad.
yes,
What's your major?
chemistry.
Absolutely. So as I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, I don't know if you were joining us at that point. The extra courses that you need to take come from the 15 credits of free electives that you must fulfill at AUS. Correct.
So if you're using your free electives to take on a minor, then certainly to take on those extra courses, you know, you may need to spend a bit of extra time as such. I mean, as Dr. Amin mentioned, if you take them as part of your degree, then you don't need to maybe spend another semester or so. But if you're using those extra free courses, free electives or so on to do a minor, then perhaps you just need to you know, stay on for a summer or an extra term to do the extra pre-med courses as such. Okay. So guys, if I may just take this opportunity to really thank you all for this wonderful discussion, for being here, for taking your time, for the students for being here and asking all of their questions. Ritu very kindly put all the details in the chat. So if you want to go on to that and get the details, you know, of her email address and how you can get in touch with her, she's just put them up here again. Thank you. And please mention AUS whenever you communicate with her, so she knows, you know, that you're a student here, and you have our email addresses. We would be more than happy to advise you and assist you through this process. Okay, so I'll leave it at that, guys. Thank you very much. I hope this has been an informative session for you all. And you know how to reach us if you need anything. Jennifer, thanks again to you and Michael for taking the time, really. I know it's very early in the morning for you, so I'm sorry to have woken you up so early. And Ritu, thank you for arranging all of this.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. This is a great opportunity, and we really look forward to communicating further with AUS students, and I'll keep you updated if we receive any emails. Yeah.
Sure. Sure, that's great, guys. Thank you. Have a lovely day, or have a lovely evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll
Thank
speak
you.
soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.